Have you ever heard of an archetype known as Salomon Great? More like Salomon Bad. No, but in all seriousness, imagine Salomon Great Gazelle, the key card of the Salomon Great archetype, basically putting everything together. Imagine there is an archetype full of gazelles. Well, my friends, it has arrived. We have received Salomon Great 2. Okay, but in all seriousness, we received the new archetype Virtual World. This archetype is shockingly good, and in part due to a rank 9 monster known as
True King of all Calamities.
So in today's video, I'm going to discuss Virtual World, why it is essentially a Calamities Go BRR deck, what happens if Calamities gets banned, and honestly, why the deck is actually really good. Before we begin, make sure to like and subscribe this video if you enjoyed, and make sure to turn on that notification bell to stay up to date with when new videos come out. But with that, let's begin. So to start off, this archetype is very reminiscent of Salomon Great and Orcust of 2019. Essentially, I would argue this is a mid-range strategy. The entire archetype is based around targeting a virtual world card you control, and then being able to send a virtual world card with a different card type. From that point, each of them have different effects. One adds a different card type from the card you sent and the card you targeted. One can reborn a monster, one can recur a monster during the end phase, and one can dump twice. So why is all of this relevant? Well, they actually have some great grave effects for you to be dumping. And not only with that, they're all special summons. Technically, you want to be playing all virtual world monsters because you're going to need a normal summon most of the time, unless you draw one of your virtual world gates to play through disruption on your normal summon. But generally speaking, you need a normal summon to be able to target and send cards. Then you can send their spell card that can banish itself to add a virtual world monster from deck to hand, and then send a card from your hand to the grave. Their trap card is going to be able to banish itself to increase or decrease the levels of any virtual world monster on the field by 3. And then we also have to keep in mind that this archetype is also based on the premise of rank 3, rank 6, rank 9, even rank 12 monsters. And with that, they can also go into level 6, level 9, and level 12 Synchro monsters. So Synchro exceeds interval of 3 based archetype, I guess you can put it. But the reason why this is so good is because they're so easily able to put 2 level 9s on the field that they can make Calamities stupidly easy. And so that's kind of like the unfair aspect of Virtual World. They put Calamities on the field, and you may not realize this, but the bodies that you are putting also are gaining you more follow-ups and more resources for the next turn. I mean, we can take one of the level 3s, for example, that recurs during the end phase. That recur during end phase doesn't seem that potent, but that also is ensuring more follow-ups. If you send a secondary spell, you're going to be able to banish that on your next turn in order to get you a search for another virtual world monster. Then we also need to keep in mind that they have a level 3 monster that, while in the graveyard, if you normal or special summon a level 3, you can special summon that virtual world from the graveyard, making even more beneficial plays off of dumping cards. They're also getting a trap card in the next set, Blazing Vortex, that can banish itself to revive a virtual world from your grave, which that is going to be amazing for the archetype. So what is my point here? Essentially, Virtual World has a lot of different tools to access, and their general game plan is going to be revolved around accessing rank 3, 6, or 9 monsters, or Synchro level 6 or 9 monsters, to be able to disrupt your opponent and to gain advantage. So some notable cards in the extra deck are going to be Stardust Charge Warrior, Coral Dragon, the level 9 Synchro Virtual World QB Shenshen. They're going to have other cards like Calamities, of course, Crocosaur. This deck can also utilize Zeus because obviously you're playing an Xyz deck and you don't get locked out of Zeus through your restrictions. So in general, this archetype looks great. Another option for the deck, you can play Magician Souls, and even though it's a level 1, you just use it before you do anything else. That's going to be able to also cycle out resources from your hand to the grave, like the Virtual World Gates, in order to draw more cards, and then you're going to be able to synchro with the level 3 tuner and souls into a Herald of the Arclight. So my point being, this deck also has a lot of ways to play through hand traps, like the souls interaction, but then there's also number 75 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow to play around Nibiru. So this deck is very versatile, but also very linear. Again, this is literally a Calamities turbo deck. The reason why you were focusing so heavily on Calamities is because why wouldn't you? This card is so crazy. One day it will get banned, and when that day happens, we gotta ask the question, will Virtual World even still be playable? But before we answer that question, a quick word from today's sponsor. If you want to check out some of the highest quality playmats on the market in the trading card game industry, make sure to check out Imperium Duelist. Again, they produce high quality playmats, but they also have some of the dopest designs in the entire industry. I mean, look at this one on screen right now. If you want to support the channel, make sure to use code BladeYGO10 at checkout for 10% off. And this will also get you a 10% discount off your order. Again, that's BladeYGO10 at checkout for 10% off. So now we have to ask, alright, this deck has a grind game clearly. It's going to have guaranteed follow-ups. It's setting up something impressive in the form of Calamities. And while yes, trap decks can play through Calamities, that's not ignoring that, again, we have more follow-ups for the next turn. So with all of this in mind, we need to now ask ourselves, well, if this archetype is good, especially because of Calamities, can it still be functional without Calamities? And to that, I say yes, depending on the format. See, we have a level 9 Synchro for the archetype, known as Shen Shen, and this card's shockingly good. Any card sent from the field to the graveyard is banished instead. You cannot take that kind of effect and ignore it single-handedly. That effect is very potent. I mean, we look at the past with cards like Dark Law, and there's a reason why that card made heroes relevant by itself in their heyday. Shen Shen also has an effect to revive itself, making it an even more sticky body, but the main point is they do have some crazy stuff that they can utilize even if Calamities gets banned. They can also utilize anything that comes out in the future for the Synchro or Xyz pool that's level 3 or higher. So because of all of this, I would argue that Virtual World isn't dead, especially because of how potent of a deck they are in just every category. But I would argue that yes, it's definitely going to be a big hit, and depending on the format, Virtual World could struggle without Calamities. But with all of that being said, I still think this deck is really good, especially with Calamities. And I'd argue that honestly, I could see this deck being tier 1. Sure, there's a deck like Zodiac that is able to make Zeus super effectively, but Virtual World also makes Zeus very effectively. Not to mention the fact that they can make Calamities, a card that single-handedly ends turns. Even against a deck like Zodiac, usually they're able to play through that kind of stuff because they can summon Zeus without even using an effect. But because Calamity stops attacks, they can't even go into Zeus, making Calamities an even crazier win condition. And because of all of this, I truly believe that Virtual World has the capability to be top tier in this metagame. If you guys want to see a deck list, I'm putting it up on screen right now. This is my current deck list. It's probably due to change over time, but I definitely think it's really good. The Speedward, Terratop, and Takatomborg package is actually really good in this deck because you do play a ton of winds and earth monsters. F in the chat for any Plunder Patrol player. This is probably the deck I'm going to play for the foreseeable future just because it does something crazy like all the other combo decks in the format, but it doesn't just die to hand traps. Like when you think Dragon Link, the deck is able to play through hand traps, but if it gets hand trapped too much, then there's not going to be much of any follow-ups after that. Whereas a deck like this can play through hand traps, it's able to end on something oppressive like Calamities, and it is still able to have follow-ups even if it gets hand trapped a ton. So because of all that, I think Virtual World is a very promising deck for the future, and I think it's definitely something you should consider, especially because the deck is so cheap. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and with that, I hope to see you soon.